Hello everyone, welcome to the internally screening review of Orca. My name's Adam.
My name's Rupert.
And today we are continuing Hooptober. No matter how far forward into November we get, we will belligerently trudge on with this series of Halloween horror reviews. And today we have Orca, a 1977 Jaws aping monster horror starring Richard Harris, the absolute titan of cinema that most of us will know as playing the original Dumbledore, and directed by Michael Anderson, who, in spite of directing this B-movie schlock, is actually responsible for some of the sort of bigger films of the 50s and later decades. He did Dam Busters, Logan's Run. What else did he do?
Around the World in 80 Days.
Around the World in 80 Days. So, an oddly prestigious director for such unbridled schlock. So this film, being a Jaws ripoff, centres around an angry, disgruntled whale that seeks revenge upon Richard Harris's character after he essentially murders his wife. And the killer whale turns into a ruthless, destroying machine, wreaking havoc upon the local Canadian fishing village, causing Richard Harris to sort of have to fight mano a mano with the eponymous Orca. Rupert, what did you think of Orca?
It is definitely a Jaws ripoff. It is definitely not good. To me, though, this is kind of the quintessential good, bad B-movie film. If you were ranking B-movies on an A to B scale, this is actually a B movie, because it's not quite up there with the greats, in my opinion. It is definitely a little boring.
Right.
At points. It definitely suffers from being very repetitive, from not being that scary, and just generally kind of character motivations particularly just making no sense, and not in necessarily a particularly funny way. Right. It's just that they keep changing the motivation in a way that's not particularly interesting, but it also has some redeeming qualities to it, which we'll get into. Pretty much the film is carried by Richard Harris,
yes, entirely.
Who is unironically just quite good in this film.
Yeah.
Even with some pretty bad writing, he's doing God's work here, because without him the film would be borderline unwatchable.
Yeah.
I don't know the woman actress in the film. She is very, very boring and annoying in just a very stern school teacherish way, and just kind of sucks the atmosphere out of the film, when the film should really have been about Richard Harris's character entirely. It should have almost maybe been like a character study about the character that happens to have killer whales, because I think the crucial place where this fails, where something like Jaws succeeds, is that Jaws makes such a compelling and interesting story of what's going on the island before you even get to the shark stuff. And this has got plenty of killer whale goodness. It doesn't skimp out on it. If that's what you're here to see, if you just want to see killer whales killing and being whales, then this has got it for you. But the great thing about Jaws is there's not even that much shark stuff in it, and yet the film is so captivating. It makes a great commentary on capitalism, as everybody knows, right? Using the shark as a metaphor. The killer whale isn't really a metaphor for anything here, other than like a really kind of obvious environmentalist message, and
even that is incredibly fumbled and haphazard.
Yes, exactly.
Which is probably my biggest issue with the film. I mean, there's obviously a myriad of like filmmaking problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, do we even go into that? Because we'll be here for days.
I think it was the first thing that really like started making me like quite powerfully angry about the film. Before it kind of got more ridiculous, and sort of I got into the rhythm of what it was trying to be. Because at the beginning, it goes into this lecture led by the sort of supporting main female actress. She has the gall to kind of go on about how orcas are real, they're like majestic, beautiful, intelligent creatures. They have like an understanding of social bonds that's like on par with humans, like, and their brain may allow for even greater like emotional capability than we can imagine. And then it goes, but if you piss one off, it will turn into an unkillable monster that literally ruins everyone's like lives. So the message is balanced between don't kill the whales, they're beautiful, graceful creatures, and if you kill the whales, they will fuck you up and eat you.
Yeah, the film also doesn't really, I guess, the other big thing, just in terms of pure like film enjoyment, is the most iconic thing about Jaws, like above everything else, what that film does well is like creating tension, and like it does it like the opening like 5 minutes of Jaws are like, you could probably teach it in like film school, and it probably is taught in film school, because it's like so fundamentals, you know, using the music, you know, the use of shots, like, you know, the POV camera. You know, when I was getting into films, you know, the Jaws use of the POV camera, you know, and, you know, at the angle where you got someone swimming, that immediately, like, I you know, that's what made me think about, like, oh wow, the way the camera is placed is making me think this. That's an interesting way to communicate that feeling using film. This film basically does none of that. You kind of have like a very right at the beginning of the film where Richard Harris decides to go out and catch a killer whale after the opening killer whale attack that you get, then goes straight back out, and then immediately he's like harpooning fucking killer whales again, and there's like no tension to it whatsoever. There's no building of dread or anything. And then towards the end of the film, the killer whale is essentially treated like some omniscient god that can't be avoided. I mean, it chases him like across the continent.
Well, I mean, we're comparing it to Jaws because it's the most obvious thing, but
and it was 77, so 2 years after Jaws.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But in story, it's far closer to Jaws for the revenge, because it literally is one whale holding a grudge against our lead character for admittedly an awful thing. And I think the thing that I could praise the film most for, other than Richard Harris's performance, which is just so endlessly charismatic, it does do a good job of kind of showing the character's transformation from cold, uncaring, you know, fisherman all out for like profit and money, and like thinking how can he utilize his skills in a way that gets him the most money, into someone who thinks more consciously about his, like, the environment and his own actions and like his conscience and moral responsibilities. And that trajectory is like eked out quite nicely, because oh god, like that scene where he kills the orca that's pregnant, and then he gets it up on boat, and it has like a stillbirth on boat. That is genuinely fucked.
Yeah, that was what I was not expecting.
That was like the grimmest part of the film by a long way, and it was so violent next to all the cartoonish bullshit of everything that happened. It happens before and after it. Yeah, that is like a moment of, dare I say, like orca body horror.
It was as close as the film got to being kind of ominous or scary. I would say that. I mean, if I'm going to say nice things about the film, I would say generally speaking, what I did like is it had a pretty consistent tone, even though, as I said, the character motivations of Richard Harris could have been better, and if you'd have just kept them more consistent, it would have been like way more enjoyable as a film, because he changes his mind about like why he's doing what he's doing quite a lot, and not in a way that's particularly interesting. It just kind of feels like the script is like struggling to keep him in the film when he needs to be.
I suppose so, yeah, because I guess, I said that the arc is good, and the arc is good in terms of a start and finish, but it's a bit of a zigzaggy
Well, that's
arc.
what I was going to say, is the other thing I liked about the film, surprisingly, because this so rarely happens with even quite good films, that I get frustrated with. For a bad film, this actually has quite a good ending, and a pretty decent ending set piece. It's not great,
and it could have been longer.
It could have been longer.
It's a bit cut short.
Yeah, but it was as close in the film as it's like a bit silly and ridiculous. You know, they end up, I guess this is spoilers for Orca in a very minor way. They end up like, you know, running away from the shark, and they end up in some iceberg place, you know, up north, you know, because
they're
the film's based in
Canada, in like Nova Scotia.
Yeah, so they go up north, and it's all icy, which is a cool change. You know, it's a cool place to set a finale. Yeah, and then you have this kind of battle between human and whale on icebergs, and at least it was like a cool setting for it. And I guess big spoiler, Richard Harris just fucking dies, which I kind of respected, because his character is a piece of shit, and it was coming, and it's the most obvious ending, but honestly I felt like it was the best ending. Yeah.
I mean, in some strange way, you could extrapolate the plot and the story of this film, change the fact that it's a fucking killer whale, and then suddenly it's like, I don't know, like a burglary gone wrong, between like, you know, two like men, and then one stalking the other, and it's like a revenge film. And I mean, I think that would be a lot more compelling.
It would be less notable because there's no whales.
Yes, true. I mean that is obviously its selling point, but I think what it shows is there is a strength in the core story, underpinning all of it. It's just that everything tying it together is so silly, and obviously having the gimmick, it is inherently silly. It's supposed to be silly, but in asking you to take it seriously with its like pseudo environmental message is where things get muddied, because it's like, well, what are you actually trying to do? Because on the posters it has shit like along the lines of directly addressing Jaws and saying, yeah, what's the thing that can kill a shark? A killer whale.
Yeah.
And I mean, true enough, but you're essentially right, you're pitting yourself against Jaws to make the scariest animal film. But ultimately, while killer whales look eerie, they're not that scary, and they're not monsters. You know, like, and trying to have it both ways and say they're beautiful creatures, we need to protect them, and here's an evil monster that's hell-bent on revenge and destruction.
Well, that's the great thing about Jaws is, you know, the most obvious observation everyone makes about Jaws is doesn't actually have anything to say about sharks, whereas this film does actually appear to be about orcas,
right?
Which the orca is not really a stand-in for anything or a metaphor for anything, which I guess it doesn't have to be, but you have to. If the film is just going to be about orcas, you've got to make the film different. You have to structure it differently. You have to change the appeal of it, and it doesn't really do that. I actually think killer whales are pretty scary. I think there's something inherently kind of creepier about them, and dolphins actually, than sharks in a lot of ways. Dolphins are obviously cuter and friendlier, so they're less scary, but you know, killer whales are like porpoises, right?
I think they are actually,
or
strictly
mammals.
speaking, they are a dolphin, strictly speaking.
Okay, so there's something slightly creepy about how intelligent they are.
Yeah.
And how they play with things. I think there's a lot of horror to be extracted from it if you wanted to go in that route. But the film isn't that interested in
Well, I
that.
think the film, the documentary Blackfish is single-handedly the most more frightening than anything that a film could do. And obviously that tells it from a far different side of, like, basically if you essentially torture these animals, then they become violent psychopaths.
Yeah.
But because they are apex predators, and you can't expect them to behave in captivity like a pet.
Yeah.
A documentary like Blackfish is incredibly nuanced in its portrayal of it. It's not saying
it's a documentary.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah, exactly. But this film has no level of nuance to it whatsoever.
Yeah,
it's just violently cutting between two completely opposing arguments. I will say, talking about like the action of the film, while it is incredibly silly and cheesy, there are some like quite satisfying moments. I think I found it really funny. In spite of my anger towards the scene, I was like, why are you doing this? But why am I enjoying it? Where the killer whale manages to somehow destroy a pipeline that sets a fire and chain reactions all the way up to like the local oil refinery or whatever. Amazing. And it just completely destroys the whole town's like gas resources. Well,
one of the most expensive and almost silly looking scenes is a scene where the killer whale goes around headbutting a lot of boats and they all sink, and you're watching the film and they're actually sinking boats. So that must have been fucking expensive to do. But they do it in a really boring way, because the whale literally shows up in the harbour, headbutts like 3 boats.
Yeah.
They all start sinking. They show you the shot of the boat sinking, and it's like, oh man, I can't believe the whale did this. And that's like the ending of the scene. There's no like build up or like, oh well, you know, we're going to use this boat for this. Oh no, or like, oh, there's this person on the boat and you know they're trapped and blah blah. There's nothing like that. Just, oh, they showed up. Oh man, look what they did to the boats. Oh man, that sucks. Which is like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is kind of impressive, but it's also completely pointless.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was another scene I liked as well. I hesitate to say liked with this film, but a scene I enjoyed was where they're on their house, which is hilariously, and this is what's really funny about the film, is they have to find ways of getting the orca to interact with them, even though one is a sea-based creature and the other is land-based. So they have to have everything incredibly close to shore. Yeah. So they have the main character's house literally on stilts over the ocean. And you're like, oh, okay. And then, of course, we all know that an orca's nose is titanium tipped, so that if it bumps into anything, it will destroy it in an instant. So it goes around knocking out all the like stands, and it like sort of the house like careens into the water. And one of the women gets like a leg bitten off or something.
I can't remember.
I think she survives it. That's another thing as well. Like loads of crew members just like sort of die one by one.
Yeah, some of them get very unsatisfying so des. One of the funniest ones is towards the end of the film where a guy's like leaning out on a rope and the whale just goes, "Brrr!" And then like they turn around and they're like, oh fuck, it got him, and then they just continue with the film.
Yeah. They're like, oh man, a true tragedy.
Yeah.
Like the first guy that dies, he goes to like church. He's like, oh man, I feel like I'm responsible, but he doesn't want to say like what he's done and stuff. Like there's something to that. Like it's still very cheesy, but obviously it's a Richard Harris focused scene, so it goes off quite well. But later on, it's just like, so many people have died. I don't give a fuck anymore.
If we're gonna go positives, I would say one thing, and that's that. When the film started, I was like, wow, this music's pretty good. It must be like sampled from something. And then the same theme gets played throughout the film. And it's a little bit repetitive, but I was like, wow, this is a pretty good theme. Wow, that was quite interesting. And then I like looked it up, and this film is scored by the one and only, rest in peace, Ennio Morricone. I was like, wow, what the fuck? It's quite a good theme. Like, if you're not interested in watching this film and you've made it this far, I'd recommend just looking up the Orca 1977 theme if you like Ennio Morricone, because it slaps.
Do you reckon the reason it's so repetitive throughout the film is they were like, yes, we need to get Ennio Morricone to do a little bit, but he was like, there is no fucking way I am doing all of the music.
Well, I can't be bothered to look it up, but I suspect it could have even just been a theme that he'd written for something else. And then like they were like, oh, it's got Ennio Morricone on the score, when really they've got like, because it really is like kind of like one piece of music.
Right, and it's just constant. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right, it is good, but I think the repetitiveness, as well as the repetition of the same orca noise with this really high pitched like noise, that it's really grating.
Also, I think this film also suffers a lot from the fact that Jaws kind of gets around this in multiple clever ways. I'm still comparing it to Jaws because it is just the most similar film.
I mean, it is.
Jaws does very clever stuff with the camera to make you feel like you're getting more action with the shark than you actually are. It, like, famously, it barely ever shows the shark. Yeah. And when it does, you see why, because oh wow, the shark looks fake, but you feel like you get more shark time because it does clever things to make you feel like the characters are closer to or interacting with the shark. Whereas in this film, it's a lot of oh god, and then it just cuts to footage of a killer whale. Yeah,
from like a Sea Life or Sea World.
And to be fair, when they do use puppets, it looks pretty cool. It looks pretty good.
Yeah, and actually, that's a good point.
They do have a lot of decent cutaway footage, but it does feel inherently disconnected.
Yeah. And it does become blatantly obvious, like any point they've got, like, I guess the same thing could be said for Jaws. Like as soon as they cut away to like real footage of a shark, you're just like, well, that's just some nature photography. Yeah. But with this, it's like we know that that's from a SeaWorld. Yeah. Like specifically, you've got, and a telltale thing for that was a lot of the shots had the floppy fin. Which is a classic. Blackfish. It was a classic sort of thing of them in captivity, rarely seen in the wild. So that also added to that sense of disconnect, because you're like, well, now I'm seeing not only a completely different whale, but one that's obviously in captivity. Again, contrasting with its overall message of don't fucking treat the whales like shit.
Yeah. What would you rate Orca?
I would rate it a 4 out of 10. I think it's like there's a lot of enjoyment to be had with it, and I could definitely see myself maybe like getting an ironic Blu-ray of it to be like, because like you said at the beginning, it's a B movie with a great amount of, like, dare I say, charm.
A bit
of charm and a lot of hilarity to it. It is grating and shit, but there is enough seemingly like unintentional humor to it that makes it really enjoyable. And obviously Richard Harris being like such a solid backbone to the film means that even at its lowest moments it has something for you to like grab hold of.
I agree, 4 out of 10, because it's so unique. There's no other film about orcas. It's just a shame that there are barely any other films about killer whales that aren't documentaries, so it has to get credit for that. But at the same time, even with like a kind of original premise, it's not really that original, sea life attacking humans, there's a trillion films about that, but they are a very unique, interesting creature. It doesn't really do anything with it, but it still end up somehow feeling quite generic and sort of cookie cutter, which is a shame. But it does have an appeal to it and a weird mixture of really bad stuff and kind of quite good stuff in a way that contrasts in quite a weird and unique way. So as a piece of culture from that time, it's quite fascinating. So I would also I would love to have a a Blu-ray of this just to have, you know. I'd love to have the poster for this film.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah.
Just in case someone comes around the house, like they see the poster, they see the Blu-ray, and they go, oh, that's interesting. They pick it out, they put it on, they go, oh my god.
Yeah, and you could just watch them make that mistake.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you want to watch Orca, do you? Okay.
I'll let you dig your own grave.
Yeah, quite. Well, that was our review of Orca 1977. If you enjoyed this review, chuck a like on it, why not? And if you dislike this review, if you're a big Orca fan or a big Richard Harris fan and you think we're going too hard on him, give us a dislike. And for more Hooptober content, as well as like James Bond reactions and podcasts, chuck us a subscribe. It'd be greatly appreciated. And we'll catch you in the next one, which may or may not be tomorrow. I've been Rupert.
Fuck. I've been Adam.
And we'll catch you tomorrow. Peace.